there, and welcome. This is Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett in Power Radio. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention, your interest. And today I've got a great guest I've talked to before. I wanted to get back with him and just kind of follow up, catch up, see what else is going on. He's done several engagements since we last spoke, and meeting and greeting people from all over the world in various, I think, opportunities to connect with people who are of like mind and certainly fascinated about all of the changes we're undergoing. Garnet Schulhauser is the author of Dancing Forever with Spirit, Dancing on a Stamp, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, and you can reach him several different ways, but let's have him talk about what this whole thing is about and his very special friend Albert before we have you connect. Okay, so hello, Garnet.
Hi, Wendy.
How are you doing?
I'm just doing fine. How about you?
I think I'm okay. My Skype is otherwise. Lots of energy, and sometimes that's what happens when I've got a little bit of an overload, is that things on the electronic range kind of tend to go a little wonky, so we'll try and get them to cooperate. But I'm really curious. You were at the Ozark Mountain conference a while back, and I think that was the last time I spoke with you, or prior to going to that. I wanted to find out how that went, and I also wanted to find out what's current with you and Albert. So whatever feels comfortable, go ahead and before, just in case somebody is not familiar with your relationship with Albert, could you just a brief reminder?
Sure. Well, Albert is one of my spirit guides, and I've had my initial contact with him was in 2007, and how it arose, I was still practicing law then, and I was strolling down the street one sunny afternoon in May, and a homeless man jumped out in front of me, and instead of going around him, I stood there transfixed because he had these amazing, dazzling blue eyes that were penetrating deep within me, right down to the depths of my soul, and also at the same time sending me this wave of pure unconditional love that infused my whole body with an amazing sense of peace and security and well-being. And so I stood there like I was in a time warp, sort of transfixed by the gaze from this guy. And anyway, make a long story short, he ended up disappearing that day. I came back the next day, the same street, found him sitting on a bench, and went up to him and said, who are you and why did you stop me? And he said, I'm a soul just like you. I'm here to answer your questions and help you on your journey. And so that was the beginning of a dialogue I had with this man. He told me early on his name was Albert, and he was one of my spirit guides in disguise, and he had chosen to manifest himself physically for me as his way of sort of introducing me to him and to the ongoing conversation we were about to have. And he came there for a very special purpose. He wanted to enlist me to be one of his messengers, and he had a number of messages, a number of revelations that he wanted me to hear, and eventually he persuaded me to write a book about those initial revelations, which resulted in my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. And then he later subsequently came back into my life again in a different format. He was in astral form. He appeared in my bedroom one night and said to me, I'm here to take you on a series of astral trips to the spirit side, to other places in the universe, other places on our planet, because I want you to see things and write about what you see and hear in your next book, because he said he believed that a picture was worth 1,000 words. So easier for him to show me rather than to describe them to me verbally. So we began a series of astral adventures, which resulted in my second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit. And then he came back in my life again after I'd finished that book and took me on another set of astral excursions to different places to meet different people. Again, every time it was for the purpose of teaching me a lesson or giving me a nugget of wisdom, which I would agree to pass on to everyone else through my books. And so that resulted in my third book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss. And then after that, he has been in my life again for another series of astral trips. He seems to have an endless amount of things that he wants to tell me and for me to relate to other people in my books. And so I finished the manuscript for my fourth book, Wendy, in early July, sent it to my publisher, and if they choose to publish it, I expect it will be released sometime in 2017. And the title of that book is Dance of Eternal Rapture. It's a sequel to the first three. Again, as I mentioned, more astral trips with Albert and more, hopefully, nuggets of wisdom that I can pass on to the readers and help them, make more sense of their journeys on Earth. And so that's my history with Albert. He's a very wise, compassionate, loving spirit, very advanced soul. And his sole purpose in contacting me, as I mentioned, was to enlist me to be one of his messengers. And so I've been quite happy to do that, quite enjoy my experience with him, and quite enjoy connecting with people who have read my books or who want to know more about Albert.
Well, the cool thing is, here you are practicing law, and this guy appears to you and says, "I'm here to answer all your questions." Did you know you had questions?
Oh, yes, he had. Well, yeah, because as my spirit guide, he of course knows what's going on in my life and my mind and everything else. So he knew I had questions, and I'd been asking myself questions over the last number of years before I met him. The eternal questions of life, like who am I, why am I here, what's my life's purpose, and what happens to me when I die. All the questions that every adult asks at one point or another in their lives. And so I've been asking myself this over and over. And so he thought, okay, I'm going to come and answer your questions and a number of other ones that arise from that. And in his mind, he thought, I can try to enlist this guy to write books and spread his revelations to everyone. So that was, so he knew I had a lot of questions. And he also hoped that I would be able to communicate his revelations to other people. So that's how it was all arranged. He told me, actually, that he and I had arranged all this before I was born, before I incarnated. But, of course, I don't remember my pre-birth planning. No one does. And so, it was all sort of arranged. I was to be a lawyer for most of my life and then experience a major transformation when he came into my life. And they hoped that I would be able to follow through. And there's no guarantee that I would have followed through on his wishes. I could have just, that day, I could have just decided to walk around him and never see him again. I could have refused to talk to him. I could have refused to write a book. But anyway, it all played out the way he wanted to, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, and part of this is, to kind of preface it the way you're doing, is that this isn't, usually when your spirit guide or something like this happens, it's free will. This isn't something that you are obligated to do. It's an amazing encounter and an amazing opportunity. I know with my own experiences, it's like this whole world opens and it's just absolutely awesome, and it's energizing and it's empowering and it's enlightening and it's illuminating, and you're just like filled with energy and curiosity and joy and like, wow, everything gets technicolor, day glow. And it's just a whole different way of being and seeing in the world when it first happens. And then sometimes you get into a thing of, well, this is routine, and then it kind of calms down a little bit, and then something else happens, and it's off to the races again. Is that what it's like for you?
Oh, absolutely. You described it exactly, Wendy. In fact, I would like to quote you in my next book, if I could, with the way you describe sort of your transformation and your epiphany, because that's a great way of describing it. That's exactly what happened to me. Before I met Albert, I was just a straight-laced, stuffed shirt corporate lawyer. And now all of a sudden, type A personality. Now, after that, I've radically changed. And a lot of the people who knew me before that, still shake their heads and wondered what happened to me. but it's an amazing experience, and very enlightening, and a very joyful way of carrying on with my life since then. And I feel like I have a new purpose, a purpose that is more meaningful than my life, my career as a lawyer. Much more meaningful to me, and so I really very much enjoy it. I'm very grateful that I took the time to sit down and talk with Albert that day, rather than sort of turn heel and run away from him. So I'm very thankful for that.
Well, I think part of it too, though, is that you opened a door. You just said, well, what if? That it was that thing of not discounting his value because of his appearance. You just were open to letting this person interrupt your life and dealing with that as it was and going forward. And instead of being a one-off encounter, it was like this whole new opportunity. And that's what I think people would question is, how did you deal with that? Because this is so unreal, unexpected, extraordinary. That's what I think still is part of the story. When somebody appears to you in a physical form and then this whole transition happens.
Well, I was initially skeptical, Wendy, for sure, with this man when he said, like I'm your spirit guide and so on, and I was, I'm here to help you, and and I said to him, why do you think you can help me when you can't even help yourself? Because it looks like you've been sleeping on the street for weeks and you smell like a dead fish. So how are you going to help me? But this was a test. I mean, he could have appeared to me as a man in a three-piece suit, or a lady in a business suit. But he deliberately chose to be a homeless person, a person who, frankly, at the time, I would have looked down on and would have thought to myself, as I see these people on the street, I would have thought, why are you begging for money? Why don't you go and get a job like the rest of us, kind of thing. So that was really my attitude about these people beforehand. So he was really testing me to see if I could see my way past his physical appearance and sit down and have a conversation with him. And so fortunately for me, I did. I don't know what would happen if I had just left him. Somebody asked me the question, well, if you had just ignored him that day, would he have come back to you in another disguise to try to contact you, show up in a different format? And I said, I don't know. I've asked Albert that, and he wouldn't say. So hopefully there was a plan B for me, but I don't know that, and I don't have to. It's water under the bridge because plan A works.
Exact words. I was going to say water under the bridge. Now it's you are where you are.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think that's a reminder to all of us, though, that things aren't always what they seem, and when we try and when we just assume that people in the street are exactly how we view them and the label we put on them, this is an example of so much more that can be happening right in front of us. And when we're open, when we're curious, and when we're available, then that wonderful little magic steps in and says, aha, see, surprise.
Yeah, and one of the real lessons from the way he appeared to me and the way I sort of, accepted him, and it was easy. I mean, once I started talking to this man, it was obvious that he was a very wise, compassionate soul. He was very special, and I knew that he wasn't just sort of the run-of-the-mill homeless person on the street. So that sort of helped me make the transition. But it really helped me understand that we should not judge other people, as you mentioned. When you see different people walking down the street or in your life, we have no place to be judging them about where they are or where they're going, because we don't know what challenges they faced or what they have planned for themselves in their pre-birth planning. We don't know where they're heading down the road, and so there's no reason for us to judge them. Judging is just sort of totally contrary to having unconditional love for people, which is really where we should be going. Because if you unconditionally love someone, you don't judge them. It's just total love, and that's it, no matter what they've done to you or to other people or what their history is. And so it was a very good example of, don't judge this homeless man, because he has dirty clothes and he smells awful and he doesn't have a home, because he's a soul and he's got a mission in life, and in Albert's case, a very special mission. And so I look at these people, I look at everyone much differently now, Wendy, and I try to understand there's a soul in there who's just having a human journey, trying to learn and experience things, and it's not my position in the least to have any judgment about them.
Well, it's like going to the closet and deciding, okay, this is a day I'm going to wear the young teenager, and this is a day I'm going to wear the older elder. This is the day I'm going to wear the infant. It's just each day you have a different appearance, a different persona, and if you look at it like that, instead of being the same old, then there's so much more novelty in the world and so much more, in my opinion, joy. But it's hard to do that 24/7 because we sometimes get locked into roles, whether it's a social role, a family role, that other people have expectations, we have expectations. How do you break that?
Well, it's not easy, as you mentioned, and most of us do get locked into it. I was locked into that until I met Albert. Clearly I was. And since, meeting with Albert, I understand now sort of who I am, what's my purpose here, why everyone else is here, and I understand now that monetary things, material, wealth, it's neither here nor there. I mean, you can have it or not have it. It's not an important part of your life's journey. We may think it is, but it's not really. I mean, our real goal is to try to learn and experience things, in this incarnation that will help our evolution as souls. That's why we're here. We don't remember what we planned or what our goals are, but we have to sort of struggle through that. And I think as soon as we realize that that's where we are, and that no matter what happens to us, there's a lesson to be learned from everything that happens to us, good or bad. And in fact, we actually learn more from the bad things than the good things. As long as we have that attitude, our journey will be much happier, more joyful, and we'll be able to not only help ourselves, but help other people who are struggling. And that's really one of the goals that we should be aiming for.
I tell you what, the bad things are a challenge. Just to get that off the table and on the table or on the plate, whatever. I can speak from that knowing of when I felt at one point in my life where I was drowning, and and the dreams were drowning. And this is even after I'd had this wonderful epiphany and fabulous shift, but there were things that were in my life, relationships and patterns, that I was having a very, very difficult time. And I even had the thing, the premonition saying this is going to be the hardest thing you will ever do. And I'm like, wow, and then some. And at the same time, it's an initial awakening to where your strength lies, and that you are never alone, no matter what it looks like. There is always an assist, and if you allow, that will come through. It's just so difficult to, I guess, impart that, give that to somebody else, because until it happens, there, I think, is still a bit of skepticism. It's like you said, with this, and I like hearing your story because it's so front and center. It's so bold. It's so out there. Mine's just a light. It's there's energy to it, and it changed my life, but it doesn't have all the dynamic that you have with that encounter. And this is what I also wanted to touch on, that sometimes we discount our own connections, our own transition, because it isn't as showy as somebody else's. And I have, other people who've told me, well, you've got this and you've got that. And I know you're getting the same thing with Albert. Where's mine? How do you help people through that?
I just tell them, I've had so many people, Wendy, ask me about how they can contact their spirit guide and talk to their guides like I talk to Albert. And I say, your guides are talking to you all the time. It's not direct telepathic communication like I have with Albert, but they are talking to you. And what you have to try to do is become a better listener, quiet your mind. Best way is through meditation. Quiet your mind, get rid of your other thoughts, and try to listen to your messages. And eventually, they will start to come through. I mean, if your guides are talking to you and you totally ignore them for most of your life, the flow of messages will slow down. But if you're paying attention to them and trying to listen, then the messages will pick up, and they'll be sort of more strident about trying to get your attention. And so, not an easy task, but it wasn't intended to be. And in fact, in my case, my contact with my guide, direct contact, was solely for the purpose of becoming his messenger. For everything else in my life, I have to try to listen carefully to the subtle messages from my guides. And so Albert doesn't tell me other things, personal things in my life. He says I'm going to have to struggle with that like everyone else.
Right.
So we're all in the same boat. And some of us, people say, well, you have a very dramatic sort of encounter with your guide. Why was that? Other people like you, Wendy, you have very, certainly more subtle contacts, nonetheless, not any less meaningful, but certainly more subtle. And I think in my case, Albert needed to hit me over the head with a 2x4 to get my attention.
I agree. Each of us, we require different kinds of incentives and different kinds of code. I think in agreement with you that as you begin to connect and you feel some kind of a hit, they call it, that was right, that was good, then you begin to learn the dialogue. You learn the way that your guides communicate with you. And some people, it's like he was saying, hey, picture speaks 1,000 words. Some people get images. Some people get audio. And other people get sensations or a need to go a certain place to see something. And there it is, a book or writing on the wall. And sometimes it's all of that together. But that's the beauty of this, is that it works for each person in a way that is most adaptable or most fluent for them to develop their own language so that it makes sense. And then the problem is then you can't translate that for anybody else. You can't say, well, this is how it's going to be, because we all are unique. And that's where this challenge comes in, and why your books are helpful, because it gives people an idea. This is what's happening and how it can happen. And then once you begin to be more familiar with, the dynamic, then it's less intimidating and it's less impossible.
No, that's exactly right. And as I mentioned, once you start sort of realizing that you're getting messages, intuitive flashes, gut feelings and so on, it's coming from your guides. Once you sort of realize that, then you'll be more keen, more aware of them when they come. and they can just sort of come throughout your day, and if you're not really paying any attention, they just come and go, and you miss them totally. So the more you get, the more you're aware of it, the more you will be able to understand where these messages are coming from, and that's really where we want to go, because our guides, you said it right, Wendy, we're never alone. Our guides are always with us 24/7, and even in your darkest moments on this earth, when you think that everyone's abandoned you, they're there, even though you may not realize it. So it's really like a great sort of a coaching system, our guides, and they're always there for you. We just have to try to be better listeners so we can get their messages.
Well, and I will say that in my instance, they sent someone, because I'm like, I can't do this. I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end. I have done everything I have agreed to do. I knew this was going to be difficult, and I'm in over my head. Help, please. And then things shifted, and a person shifted it, and it was completely, totally unexpected. And I did not, you don't know how it's going to play out, but those kinds of things are just being receptive and in that state of, I need help. I am ready, please, and let it be what it is. And then you can't judge the help that shows up.
No, very true. Yeah. And it sounds like, I'm not familiar with sort of your journey, Wendy. It sounds fascinating. I think you should write a book about it.
Okay. Well, I wrote one called Talking to Nightlights. That's the beginning. Okay. But that happened back in 1997. And that's what these lights, when I refer to the nightlights, that's what it's about, is this ongoing 24/7 communication. It's energy. And so I don't have a physical being. I've even asked about that. They said, no. This is energy. This is your deal. This is how you work with it. But what happens is the nightlights interact, and wherever I take them, they also do this little on again, off again, or mine the way it works to conserve the energy of the light, because it's electrical. That's how it comes through. It at night when I go to sleep, it turns off. So this is not a night light. And when I've asked, well, okay, they said, no, we're conserving energy. You take a break, we take a break. But when it first happened, it was so phenomenal to me to see this, to realize this was going on back in 1997, 98, that when I saw it, I'm like, does anybody else see this? And that's when I learned how to channel, learned how to connect intuitively, and began having all these other experiences that were much more dynamic and spiritually engaging. And when that happened with that, then I learned a new dialogue, a new way of being, and again, less judgmental. That comes into it, because you never know where your help is going to come from. And it's about being more self-aware of things that we have in us that block us from our own good and from the value of others, that we have to work through and get rid of. And in some cases, then they send us people that will be hard to deal with, so that we work through our challenges in the best method. And at that point, we're working through them awake, and it still doesn't make it any easier.
Wasn't intended to be easy, Wendy.
Quit it.
If it was easy, we probably wouldn't learn anything. So that's part of the challenges of life on Earth, is that a lot of the lessons we learn and challenges are quite difficult. They can be quite disturbing to us, but they're there for us to learn the lesson and to get and overcome the challenge. So, and in fact, most of them you plan beforehand. Some just arise because of free will actions of yourself and other people. But everything that you do on this journey, there's something to be learned from it. So that's the way we have to look at things. And if we can see things that way, then we won't get quite so upset when the bad things happen to us in life. I mean, nobody wants to go through the bad times, but we all go through it a number of times to varying degrees, and that's just part of our learning experience.
Well, and some of the souls that show up are doing it because you've asked them to. And so that part of that thing is like, you don't get to see until after it's all over who was really your best friend. They may not have had the best friend outfit on, but they helped you do your hardest and most rewarding and challenging work. But that's the way it had to happen, because it wasn't going to be a cakewalk. It was going to be through the trenches and out the other side. Quick question. You got the benefit of going back and looking at your past lives. And that part of it, I think, is also helpful when we have kind of an understanding of what we've been through before.
Yeah, I did get a glimpse of a few segments of some of my past lives in the Akashic Records, which Albert took me to. I've been there several times, and in response to my question about, tell me about some of my past lives, I mean, he said, well, we can be here forever because you had a lot of them, but he showed me a few highlights, and I've heard somebody say that, a wise soul or an old soul is just a slow learner. So I'm not sure if I'm in that category or not. But he said I've had many incarnations on the planet. He showed me a few of them, and some of them were quite disturbing. Like I mentioned this before. I was in I think it was 17th century England, and I was hung for stealing some half-rotten apples to feed my family. And then you wonder in those days how they could have capital punishment for a petty crime like that, but they did, and I was. And in another life, I was a roving gambler in Wyoming in the 1870s, and I ended up winning a bunch of money at a gambling table in a saloon from a little man who couldn't afford to lose the money. Ended up accusing me of being a cheater, and then so instead of me riding out of town and leaving him, I let my pride get the better of me, and I ended up allowing him to goad me into a gunfight on Main Street, and I ended up killing him.
Okay, hold on. We'll stop right there because that's a nasty ending. We want to come back and get the happy ending, okay?
Okay.
We got to take a break. Garnet Schulhauser is my guest. 3 wonderful books, a 4th in the works. We're going to come back and find out more about Garnett and his spirit guide, Albert, and all of the things that relate to that here. It's Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett in Power Radio.
Do you get tired of styling your hair every day? And do you want a good hairstyle every day? Hi, I'm Sarah Schuster. I went on a website called inventnow.org, and after that, I decided to invent something too. Something called the Insta-Do. Just imagine, you just put it over your head like a helmet does, and you pick your hairstyle with the buttons on the side, and you can have instant hairstyle in seconds. People like it. People like Jeff Bart. I like it. And people like Kenneth. It's a helmet thing, and it fits over your head, and it's great. Thank you, Kenneth. You should go to inventnow.org, and it could help you come up with your own invention. After all, look at me on the radio now.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions, or just play some games at inventnow.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the National Inventors Hall of Fame Foundation, and the Ad Council.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong. I'm home, and I love it. I'm home where I belong.
It's always nice to come home, but these days, many Americans are at risk of foreclosure and losing their homes. Fortunately, help is available. Making Home Affordable is a free program from the U.S. government that has already helped over 1 million struggling homeowners, and we want to help you.
I'm home, and I love it. I'm home.
Find out now what your options are. Go to makinghomeaffordable.gov or call 1-888-995-HOPE. The sooner you act, the better chance we can help you.
I'm home, where I belong.
Brought to you by the U.S. Treasury, HUD, and the Ad Council.
Have you ever lost a cat? And have you ever wanted to get your cat back after you lost it? Hi there, I'm Andrew Hoffman. I went on this website called inventnow.org. Then I decided to make an invention of my own. It's called the Lost Cat Magnet Invention. So you can get your cat back after you lost it. Just turn it on, and lost cats stick to it. That's a good cat. If your cat was hiding up in a tree, it won't be up a tree anymore. It will be stuck to the lost cat magnet. And sometimes they fly toward you in the air. Just listen to one satisfied cat. See, that's proof. You should go to the inventnow.org website too. But just remember one thing. Don't do a lost cat magnet.
Anything's possible. Keep thinking. Get started on your own inventions, or just play some games at inventnow.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the National Inventors Hall of Fame Foundation, and the Ad Council.
Hi there. Conscious Living, my guest, Garnet Schulhauser. And the books are great if you haven't ever experienced something so front and center as having your spirit guide appear as a person, and then accompany you on all sorts of fascinating journeys and give you insight in unique and very unusual ways. This is a way to tap into that. And the one I chose this time, Dancing Forever with Spirit, Astonishing Insights from Heaven, I think is a kind of an interesting overview, because in this we're talking about one of the past lives that Albert experienced. And of course, that was the sad note, the getting shot. I had to interrupt you in the middle of that. Were they all that intense?
No, there was some some lives he showed me where actually did some good, which was pleasant.
I actually did some good. I like that.
Yeah, and so some of them were pleasant. People can read my book to get into the details of them. But one of the interesting aspects of viewing, your past lives or anybody else's life in the Akashic Records is you not only get to watch the events sort of in whatever order you want, slow or fast, and it's like watching a 3D movie, but you can actually tap into the thoughts and feelings and emotions of the people you interacted with, which is really quite amazing. So that and this happens to us when we finish our current lives. We'll have a life review in the Akashic Records, and we'll go back sort of over every aspect of our current lives, and we actually get to tap into the thoughts and feelings of the people that we dealt with on a daily basis, co-workers, friends, neighbors, or whatever. And the amazing thing is that that's a great learning tool, because if you said something mean and cruel, say, to a neighbor or a coworker one day, and maybe you didn't even intend it, you will get to sort of feel their distress and anguish over your unkind words. And that's it really sort of draws our attention to the fact that we can hurt and offend people, whether it be people or animals, by just the things we say without really carefully thinking about what we're saying or how they're going to react to our words. So it's a really great learning tool. And I got to experience a few segments of my current life in this life review, and it really was really brought to my attention the fact that we really have to be careful about what we say and do, so that we don't risk offending other people or even the animals in our lives, our pets, our dogs and cats, and anything else that we encounter. So it's an amazing learning tool. And as you mentioned before, as you're going through life, you don't really know who your true friends are. When you get to your life review, you will find out exactly who your true friends were and what everyone's agenda was that you've encountered in your life. So it's really quite a very much of a learning tool. Helps you prep yourself for your next encounter as you sort of look back on this life and say, okay, well, I made mistakes here, there, and I want to make sure I don't repeat them. So I'm going to sort of plan my next life so that I can encounter these challenges again, and hope this time I can become a better person and overcome them in a better way.
I'm so glad you bring up animals, because I think they are absolutely crucial to helping us expand our awareness, our empathy, our compassion, our understanding. They do it in ways that it's so subtle we aren't always aware of this. We do extraordinary work with pets and just animals in general. And can you touch on that?
Yeah, well, one of the segments of my current life, my past, a few years ago of my life, that I saw with Albert in what he called the preview to my life review, was an encounter I had when I was practicing law with my little dog Oscar, who was a miniature Schnauzer. And as I'm watching this, it's sort of the scene was my little dog was sort of sleeping on the bed by the window. He heard the garage door opening, so he rushed out to the back door and waiting for me. I walked in through the door, and instead of greeting him or giving him a pat, I was lost in thought. So I just sort of walked past him, totally ignored him, and I got to feel the feelings of this little dog, and it was really heartbreaking, because this poor little dog, he'd been waiting for me all day to return home. All he wanted was just an acknowledgement from me that I still loved him, and then he was basically heartbroken, and I walked right past him, and he had to he slowly slunk back to his bed and put his little head down on the edge of the bed, and if dogs could cry, there would have been tears rolling down his cheeks. And when I'm watching all this, I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't realize all the distress and anguish I caused this poor little dog. I didn't realize that I was such an important part of his life, and that he really wanted me to acknowledge him as soon as I got home. So it was really an eye-opener. Told me that animals really do have feelings, that have emotions. They're a lot smarter than we think, and that ever since then I've been sort of very mindful of this when I deal with my current little mini Schnauzer Abby, or other animals, other people's pets, and so on. I realize that these are thinking and feeling beings, and they have to be treated with dignity and respect.
Oh, and that hurts my heart to hear it, because I know I've been guilty of the same thing in different times in my life, and there are some that I've gone back and said, "I'm sorry, please forgive me. Please forgive me. I had no idea. I would do it all differently if I knew." And yet at the same time, I knew I couldn't do it differently because I wasn't there yet. And it's just, in that way, it's so unfair. You're just like, "Oh, I can't undo it." And I'm who I am now, though, because of it. And I hope I've improved.
Yeah, and actually, I did have an encounter with the soul that was my little dog Oscar in one of my astral trips, and everything's all okay. I mean, he basically said, you really did hurt my feelings horribly that day, but that was just part of your learning experience. I hold no grudges. Souls on the other side, no matter what happens on this planet, they all unconditionally love each other, no matter what they did to each other on Earth. So once you get back there, it's sort of nothing but an unconditional love. So it was, Oscar, he showed up actually in his dog format when I first crossed over the first time, and he was, basically I knelt down, he licked my face, and his tail was wagging, and then eventually he transformed into the soul that he is now. And so it was all great, and it was wonderful to see him greet me the first time I made a trip to the spirit side with Albert. And Albert says that, for most people, their beloved pets will be there to greet them when they transition from the earth plane to the spirit realm, and they will be there in the form that you remembered them, and it's designed to sort of like make you feel welcome and make you feel happy and joyful at the fact that they did survive their physical death and that they are there now on the spirit side to enjoy the rest of eternity with you.
Well, and that's my sense and my experience exactly, because some of them worked with me when they transitioned, and as they transitioned to help me understand death better. And like I had a cat who he said, "You have to leave. You are making this much harder than it needs to be." I'm like, I was floored, because in my own belief, I thought no animal should ever die alone, and by my staying and not letting go and hanging on, he's like, "Excuse me, it takes a whole lot of effort to transition, and you are blowing it." I was just floored, but I had to leave. And when I came back, he had transitioned, and he was walking in the position of one who was walking, and I held him and I said, "Please, please, please, just one more breath, just blink, just let me know." And it was like, "See, this is why you had to leave. It's all good, it's okay." But that kind of thing, it's so unconscious. Our desperation, our neediness, our attachment, our whatever it is, that isn't love in that aspect, because it's so desperately empty to have this feeling of, "I will be nothing if you leave me," instead of, "Please go. I want this to be painless. I want you to feel comforted. I want you to know I will always love you no matter what form you're in, and thank you for being in my life." That is still incredibly super painful when you lose somebody, and no matter what anybody does, when they're not there to hug you back or kiss you or lick or meow or whatever it is that your pet animal, whatever companion does, it still is a big void, and getting through that transition process takes practice.
Yeah, no, it's not easy for anyone to lose a beloved pet, and I certainly have. Oscar passed away a few years ago, and our current little dog is having health problems. She's got diabetes, and now she's gone blind, and I don't know if she's going to be around here long. It's going to be heartbreaking for me and my wife when she decides to make the transition, and of course, we hope it won't happen for a long time, but we know eventually it will, and it's going to be hard. But I'm comforted by the fact that she will be there on the spirit side when I transition over. And so I'm looking forward to that, but in the meantime, of course, we miss them terribly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you're touching on that too, because the animals are really important connections for us, and some of us work better with pets than we do with people. Not a slam, okay? Just saying that sometimes they're able to reach our heart in ways that humans can't, because we have those judgments and those things that, no, you're not going to get near me. But the pet just comes in and goes, "The door was down, everything was open, I'm here, and you're going to have to go through it."
Well, that's one of the things that animals do teach us, and certainly I have from my pets, is unconditional love, because that's what they give to us. Unconditional love. There's no judgment. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday or what you did at work today. When you come home, it's like there's my beloved human, and they just pour unconditional love to you. And so it's really, you can learn a lot from them if you just sort of watch how they treat you, and if you can learn from that and try to treat other people and other animals the same way, we're going to have a much happier planet to live on. But it's you know, they're amazing teachers in many ways, and they also, you know, provide us with a lot of challenges, and that's all by design, and it was all planned beforehand, and that's part of our challenge is sort of to go through all these lessons and learn from them and for other people in our lives.
Okay, Garnett, you've got another book coming out. You're working on it right now, going to be out in 2017. Can you give us a hint or a few little tidbits?
Yeah, my fourth book is, as I mentioned before, is entitled Dance of Eternal Rapture. Again, it's with Albert taking me to various places in astral trips to meet with people. I don't want to get into great detail, I'll give you a few tidbits. I met with, for example, on this set of trips, I met with Buddha. I met with Muhammad. We had great conversations about sort of the, you know, where they started off and where their religions sort of were going. Fascinating conversations. I went to a very advanced human civilization on a planet many light years away that really had come up with some very neat ideas. They had, one of the things was they had basically developed a diet pill which allowed them to basically, to take the pill, they could basically eat whatever they wanted to, as much as they wanted to, and never gain any weight. And I said, that's something that we'd love to have on Earth. And they said, well, your scientists are going to have to figure it out in their own due time, because we're not going to give you that secret. So that was a very fascinating, it was a very advanced, harmonious civilization, which just is an eye-opener for us, I guess, because, you know, I always wondered and asked Albert, you know, are there human civilizations on other planets? He says yes, and I said, are they sort of like ours? And he said, well, some are, and others are quite different, and a lot of them are very sort of advanced, but very peaceful and harmonious civilizations, and so that was one of them. Of course, I had an encounter with a human civilization, which I describe in my third book, which was a very interesting one. It was again on a different planet, and this civilization was a matriarchal society run solely by women. So it was humans just like us, but the women ran everything. The men were very docile and compliant. They weren't allowed to hold positions of power or authority or even vote. And how that arose was because they, a long time ago, their civilization was very patriarchal like ours, ruled by violent and abusive men who subjugated the women. And one woman had a vision in a dream, that she was told that there was a certain plant in their forest which, if ingested by the men, would drastically reduce their testosterone levels. And so she secretly gathered the other women, and they eventually, you know, fed this plant to all the men. And so over time, because of the low testosterone levels, the men became very docile and compliant, and the women basically took over. And ever since then, the women have been running the society. And now what they do is they chemically sterilize all the young boys at the age of 3. And so that's why, you know, the men are doing what they are, but they weren't subjugated. They were happy, allowed to do recreational and artistic activities and enjoy life. And they didn't
just put the sword away.
Sorry?
They just put the sword away.
They didn't miss, you know, running the planet. They were very happy, and they didn't miss their sex drive because they never remembered having it. And so that's one way where a human civilization has found a way to have a peaceful and harmonious society.
I've heard a similar story from
I, as a man, would want to sort of jump into. I was happy to get away from that planet, but you know, it's just another example of how civilizations can develop differently, especially human civilizations. And you know, and as I left that planet, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find a happy midpoint between the extremes of that planet and the extremes of our planet, and where men and women could be equal and live in peaceful harmony. So that's where we really should go. It just shows you that there's so many different aspects to civilizations in our universe, many of which we can't even dream about what they are and what they do. I saw a few of them, and you know, so and so there's the other civilization I mentioned with the diet pill that's described in my fourth book. So there's many fascinating excursions, many fascinating people that I met that are in my fourth book, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but there will be some glimpses further on as I get closer to publication date.
Well, and part of this too was in one of the other books you also discussed a possible. We need to change our trajectory. We're having some potential fallout from the path we're on right now, and it may not improve if we don't start appreciating our planet better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I mentioned before in our previous show that I had one of the meetings I had very fascinating was a meeting with the consciousness of Mother Earth, Gaia, and she basically her message was, look at I look after my planet. I'm trying to have a very balanced and harmonious ecosystem for all of my flora and fauna, including humans. And I'm very distressed at the fact, she said, that humans have been abusive to the planet through our pollution and abusive to other animals. And she said, look at humankind, civilization, where it is right now. We've got to change our course, change our trajectory. Otherwise, it could end up very badly. And so that was just a warning that she was giving to us that we really need to change our ways. We need to stop. We need to start respecting Mother Earth and all the other creatures on our planet in a much more intense way and stop the abuse. And if we don't, it could be disastrous for us. So that was an interesting message she gave. Hopefully, people who read my books can take heart to that and try to do their best to not only do it themselves, but encourage other people to become more respectful of our environment.
Okay, back to the basics of this. When Albert shows up and says we're going on a trip, is this because you are asleep? Are you meditating? How does this work?
Well, on the astral trips, I'm asleep in bed, and every time I sort of just wake up in bed and I see, Albert standing there in astral form, that's how he appears. He appears, when I'm sleeping, and then he basically reaches out, grabs my astral hand, and pulls my astral body out of my physical body, and I can see my physical body still laying in bed, sound asleep, but now I'm in astral form, and then he just leads me away. And when you're in astral form, of course, you have no substance, no matter. You can just float through ceilings and walls and up through the clouds. And if you want to travel, basically, I don't know how to do it myself, but Albert will say we're going to go somewhere, and he just thinks where he wants us to go, and we sort of end up there virtually instantaneous. And so that's how he appears on the astral trips. And we meet a lot of people, a lot of souls in the spirit realm, many of whom have incarnated on Earth, others who came from different planets. He also takes me to a lot of different planets in the dense universe, including Earth, to learn some lessons there. So it's all very fascinating. A great way to travel, I can tell you, Wendy. There's no security checkpoints, no cramped seating, no crowded airports. It's a wonderful way to travel.
The bottom line would be the ticket price. It's like, okay, it's free. Got it.
Exactly.
I don't have to pack the suitcase. And how was your wife? How does she respond to all this?
Very well, actually. She's very encouraging to me. She's a very spiritual person, very intuitive herself, and she's had a number of very psychic encounters, I would call them, with her deceased parents, for example. And so she was very, when I first told her I was writing a book about my encounters with the spirit guide, she was very very accepting. She thought that's great, that's wonderful. I'm glad you're doing this. So she's very supportive, and that's wonderful, because it would have been very difficult if she had just sort of scorned the whole concept. But actually, it worked out beautifully. I
wondered, has she ever had a sense of Albert?
Not of Albert, or at least she hasn't told me if she has. But I don't, and I don't know if she's ever had any direct encounters with him. But as I mentioned, she has encounters with some of the other spirits in the spirit realm. And the interesting thing was, she gets these messages all the time. And yesterday, she got a message early in the morning telling her the sex of our new grandchild that's on the way. And 2 hours later, my son and daughter-in-law called, and it was the right sex. They had a ultrasound, and they found out the sex, and they said, do you want to guess what it is? And she said what it was, and they said, yeah, you're exactly right. And she got that message 2 hours before the phone call. So she gets these things all the time.
Tuned in. I think that for me, that's just a broader awareness of who we are, that we're much more connected than we realize. And so she already had that availability to kind of expand and say, aha, gotcha. Well, okay. So with the next book, really just in a way of all of this experience, is there a highlight? Is there something that that you think stands out from all of your experiences with Albert and this whole being who you are as opposed to who you were as a lawyer?
I think that the main theme is that we are beings of energy, and we are eternal. We live forever, and that in our natural home, the spirit side, there's nothing but unconditional love. There's no negative emotions, no pain, suffering, hardships, or whatever. That's where we really came from. And one of the highlights that I had so far in my travels was at the time I had a visit to a focal point of the source, and that really demonstrated to me that the world, the source, is connected to all of us. We're connected to it, and the source is the sort of the prime source of all unconditional love, all love in the universe. And I actually had an immersion in this focal point where it was an amazing feeling, a feeling of love that you just can't imagine. It was like, as I described to some people, if you can think of the most intense emotional high you've ever had in your life so far, like the day you got married or the birth of a child, and then multiply it by a few thousand times, that would get close to the feeling I had when I was immersed in this focal point of the source. And so once you realize that you came from there and that you can merge back into the source anytime that you're ready to do so, and then reemerge again, that you just realize that we're on a joyful journey of exploration that's designed to sort of help us grow and evolve, and we can do that at our own pace, and that we can always move back and merge with the source anytime we want to before we reemerge. And we'll always have our individual identities, so we don't ever sort of lose ourselves in the whole scheme of things. And so that's, knowing who we are, where we came from, and where we're heading is very comforting and very inspiring, and probably the core message that Albert wanted to give me and to all my readers.
I have to ask a question, and if you can answer it in a way that doesn't divulge too much personal, but of all this work, there has to be something that is still a challenge. Can you name what your biggest challenge still is? You're very, very human. We all are. Is there something that is still, for you, an obstacle that you're working and you know that is one you need to clear?
Well, the biggest challenge for me is just trying to remember everything that Albert told me about who I am and where I'm going, and sort of the scheme of reincarnation on Earth. Hard to remember that as I go through my day-to-day life. As I'm, I don't have a formal job anymore, but when I'm trying to, struggling to write my books in a way that makes sense to people, when I'm dealing with day-to-day things like, preparing, helping my wife prepare dinner, walking my dog, looking after my little dog, dealing with neighbors, dealing with my children, driving down the freeway, it's easy for me to forget all the wise things that Albert told me, and I react all too often in a very typical human fashion. And so I have to really struggle with that, and when I have a down period and something is not going right in my life, I have to struggle to remember that it's just all a lesson, and that I need to sort of remember who I am and where I'm trying to go. So it just a struggle to deal with the human emotions that we all have to face every day during our journeys on Earth.
I agree. Yeah. That thing of darn it, that wasn't me. No, that was the other me. One foot in the spirit plane and one foot on solid ground, and trying to figure out how to respond best to each of those situations isn't always right there at the tip of your awareness. Okay, we're going to have to go, but I do want to thank you so much for talking to me again, because I know you've got so many things in the works, and you are constantly upgrading and expanding and finding out more information, especially with Albert, but with all of your other involvements. Dancing Forever with Spirit, that's one of the books. The other two are also available, and you can check these out online and check out your website. Go ahead. You can connect to Facebook, and where else?
Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube. The best source of information to connect to all these is my website, which is GarnetSchulhauser.com. That's hard to remember, but if you Google Dancing on a Stamp or Dancing Forever with Spirit, you can get to my website, and there's the links to all my social media sites and all the other information about my books, and buy links where you can buy them. So that's the best source of information. My email address is there as well. I'd love to hear comments or questions from your listeners.
Well, yeah, and each person may have their own way of connecting, and you can add that to the equation. I just think we have to share these things to give each of us a chance to say, oh, gosh, that was happening. I didn't connect it. And then you go back and take a second look and say, really, I'm already there. I'm giving myself, not as much credit because it wasn't as showy and as light and bright and really cool as somebody else's. But it's just as important. It's just as important and just as powerful. Garnett, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Wendy. I really enjoyed the show.
Okay. And the book, yes. I think I have to write another one. I've had several people. You're not the only one who said, you need to write a book. I'm like, but I did. And okay, it's time to go ahead and add on because a whole lot's happened since then. And these nightlights are still happening. If you are listening to today's show, remember you can download. There are a lot of shows in the archives. I've done other shows with Garnett, so go back and catch up on those. And a new show, Wendy's Coffee House on KCMO Radio, Talk Radio. That is up and going. It's live Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Central Time, or you can catch the podcast. You can check out that website, wendyscoffeehouse.com. I've got a new one, Animal N, the letter N, site, and that's going to be more about animal communicators and the spirit connection we have with animals, because to me that's a very powerful opportunity to connect with all spirit in all forms. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. I appreciate who you are, and we may never meet, but we are connected, and this is an amazing place to be, this moment in time. Thank you. Till next time, stay curious. There's a whole lot out there waiting for you to discover. See ya.